Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're skipping the grainy footage, the plaster casts, and the novelty bumper stickers. Instead, we're venturing way beyond modern pop culture to uncover the deep, thousand-year-old indigenous history of North America's absolute most famous mystery. We're talking about Bigfoot, but definitely not the commercialized monster you're probably picturing. We're going to dig into the authentic, ancient roots of this legend.
So let's kick things off by challenging what we actually think we know about Bigfoot. Ask almost anyone when this whole legend started, and they're probably going to point you to the late 1950s, specifically 1958, when a logging crew out in Bluff Creek, California found these massive, mysterious footprints in the mud. A local news guy named Andrew Genzoli wrote it up for the Humboldt Times, threw out the catchy nickname Bigfoot, and boom, a modern American icon was born. But is it really just a mid-20th century media invention, or is it something much, much older?
Let's look at Section 1, Before the Modern Bigfoot, the tip of the iceberg.
To find the true origins, we have to look completely past this modern era of cryptid hunting. Look at the vast historical gap on this timeline. I mean, 1958 feels like a long time ago to us today, sure, but jump back to the 1920s and a guy named J.W. Burns was already cataloging Native American encounters with what he called the Sasquatch. And if we go back even further, literally a full millennium before those Bluff Creek loggers ever fired up a chainsaw, indigenous peoples in California were painting massive depictions of hairy bipedal creatures on rock faces.
It's wild to think about, but our modern idea of Bigfoot, the one on the beef jerky commercials, is merely a very recent adaptation of a vast, complex, and ancient cultural reality. Long before European colonization, indigenous cultures across the entire North American continent kept incredibly rich oral traditions about large, hair-covered humanoid creatures living deep in the remote wilderness.
Moving right along to Section 2, Coast Salish and the Sasqu'ets, Linguistic Roots.
Okay, to really understand these roots, we have to look at the Coast Salish people of the Pacific Northwest, who maintain stories about the Sasqu'ets. Now, this is a word from the Halkomelem language, which was spoken by groups like the Chehalis in British Columbia. It translates roughly to a large, hairy, human-like being, or a timber giant of the mountains. Back in the 1920s, that researcher I just mentioned, J.W. Burns, was actually working on the Chehalis Indian Reserve. He sat down, gathered stories from the locals, and basically anglicized their word Sasqu'ets into the term we all recognize today, Sasquatch.
I absolutely love this quote because it shows exactly how early 20th century Native informants directly passed their community's knowledge on to researchers. This is Charlie Victor speaking to Burns in the 1920s. Notice he doesn't call them mindless beasts or monsters. He calls them strange people and hairy mountain men. For these communities, these beings were just an established part of the natural ecosystem, like a separate tribe that simply chose to live apart from human civilization.
Which brings us to Section 3. Two sides of the wild man, menace versus protector.
This is where it gets really fascinating, because these weren't just one-dimensional animals. They played drastically different thematic roles depending entirely on which tribe was telling the story. Check out this contrast. On the left, we have the Tsonoqua from the Kwakwaka'wakw people. She was depicted as a menacing, cannibalistic ogre. Parents totally use this creature as a boogeyman to warn their kids, don't wander into the dark woods at night or the Tsonoqua will snatch you. But then look at the archetype on the right, the Mayak Datat of the Yokuts tribe down in California. To the Yokuts, this hairy man wasn't a monster at all. He was revered as a protective demiurge, literally a physical and spiritual creator being who helped shape the world and protected his people.
So, what this tells us is that these hairy humanoids were not just spooky campfire tales meant for a quick jump scare. They were absolutely essential cultural touchstones. They enforced moral instruction for the kids, served as spiritual protectors, and honestly, they bridged that terrifying gap between the safety of a village and the total unknown of the wild. By giving a face and a name to the wild, these communities could actually make sense of the uncharted wilderness around them.
Let's look at some hard evidence in Section 4, the Hairy Man Petroglyph, Tangible Ancient Proof.
This brings us to something physical you can actually see and touch. We're looking at a reproduction of the hairy man petroglyph, also known to the Yokuts as the Mayak Datat. This piece of ancient art is out at Painted Rock on the Tule River Indian Reservation in California. And anthropologists estimate this rock painting is easily somewhere between 500 and 1,000 years old.
To put this into perspective, that central figure is massive. It stands 2.6 meters high. That's over 8.5 feet tall. It's painted in these really striking red, black, and white pigments, showing a towering two-legged creature with its arms spread wide, covered in long hair, and it has these huge, haunting eyes. And if you look closely, surrounding it are smaller figures that some researchers and Yokuts tribal members believe actually represent a whole Bigfoot family, a mother, a father, and a child right alongside other animals from their specific creation story. This artifact pretty much proves that stories of giant, hairy, wild men have been an integral, sacred part of the North American landscape for over a millennium.
So what's our big takeaway here? Well, recontextualizing Bigfoot through these indigenous origins completely flips the script on how we view the whole subject. It reveals this deeply human, ancient effort to understand our place in the wild. This legend was here centuries before European colonization. It's rooted in authentic native languages, like the coast Salish Sasquatch, not some 1950s newspaper column. These beings had profound spiritual and instructional purposes, and physical artifacts like the painted rock petroglyphs prove exactly how ancient these traditions really are.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. We've traced this figure from a sacred, thousand-year-old creation deity painted on a rock wall to a complex, wild man in Coast Salish oral traditions, all the way to a modern pop culture icon. So why do you think a legend born so long ago still has such a powerful grip on us today? What does our ongoing obsession with Bigfoot actually say about our own modern need to believe that there is still some wild, untamed mystery left out there in the woods? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and keep questioning the origins of the stories we tell.